Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Susan Deutsch, and I am the program manager at the Muse Writers Center, and we are a proud co-host of this event. The Muse is a nonprofit creative writing center in Southeastern Virginia. We're located in Norfolk, and we provide classes, outreach, and community events such as this for all ages, all genres, all types of writers. And we really try to make it a true community here. So check out our website at the-muse.org to learn more and find out what other events are coming up. We have a lot of great ones in store. And this event is a panel with the authors of Unbound, which is an anthology, and it's in partnership between the Muse Writers Center, Slover Library, and Books Forward. And I'm going to hand it off to Sarah from Slover to tell us a bit about that.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's event. I'm Sarah Taylor Glazer, the Teen Youth Associate from Slover Library in downtown Norfolk. We are a public library, the main one for Norfolk Public Libraries. Please check out our website, sloverlibrary.com, and check out our events that will be posted on our calendar. We are very glad to be able to be part of the partnership with the Muse Writers Center and Books Forward to help bring programs like this to our patrons. Thank you so much for participating today. And thank you, Susan, for hosting.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so I am Emily Colin, and I am the co-editor of the book that we are going to be all reading stories from today. It's called Unbound, Stories of Transformation, Love, and Monsters. And I know it sounds like those three things might not have a lot to do with each other, but in our stories, they really, really do. And so there are 12 contributors to this anthology overall, and we'll talk a little bit more about how the anthology came to be when we get into the Q&A portion. But for now, on this rainy Saturday, where I am anyway, in coastal North Carolina, I just want to tell you that the contributors to this anthology are from all over the world. And that is one of the most exciting things about the anthology to me, is the fact that we, during the pandemic, when none of us could see each other in person, we were able to create, Lisa's showing us the actual book, we were able to create this really beautiful thing that was, and Angela's showing us the book, I think she might have the hardcover. There we go. Yes, those are our little Vanna Whites, little old Wheel of Fortune reference for you right there from back in the day. But at any rate, so we're so excited to be here today to be on this panel with you. And what we're going to do is we've got, let's see, Angela is here, myself, John is here, Heidi, and then Lisa. And Lisa is actually also the co-designer of the anthology. So if we've got folks out there who are interested in how you design a book and how all of that comes together, you've got folks out there who are interested in how you edit a book and how all that comes together when you have writers from all around the world. If you've got folks out there who are interested in how you write short stories, why you write on a theme, how you get a group of people from multiple countries and continents to all pull together and create something beautiful, we are here for any and all of those questions. Don't be shy, because we've all been where you are right now. So what we're going to do is just bridge right on into the readings. And we're going to go ahead and start with Angela. So Angela, if you like, can you just tell us the name of your story, and before you read, just where you are in the world and a wee little bit about what inspired you to write this story.
Where I am in the world. Hi, hello everyone. I'm in Colombia. I'm in Bogota, Colombia, which is the capital city of Colombia. And we are being graced with a rare sun today. Colombia is a tropical country, but Bogota is a very cold place. So, you know, I'm not wearing a hoodie, which is a good day. It's a rare day, but it's a good day. As for what inspired me, I've always loved writing. I'm a recovering journalist. So my first attempts at fiction were like baby steps into the kiddie pool. I didn't want to stem too far from things that had actually happened. So they read more like a reporter trying to tell something, but not really fiction-y. And I tried to stay as much as I could attached to real things. But I had like this idea that I wanted to do something else. And Heidi is actually the person who contacted me. And she said, listen, I'm getting together with some friends and there's an anthology, and she kind of briefed me on that. And I said, well, I've been thinking about a story, and it started with the name. So the name of my story is Jolly Fats Dies Tonight. And it all started with the name Jolly Fats as the idea of someone who is having an identity crisis, beginning with their name, beginning with the fact that they don't want to be the jolly fat cousin. They don't want to be the butt of every joke. They don't want to be that person, and they don't feel that they are deep down, and they don't know how to change other people's perception of them. And of course, it's a journey to realize that first you have to change your perception of yourself, which is pretty autobiographical. The story of Jolly in many ways mirrors my own experience, having been born in Colombia and raised in the United States until I was 10, and then I came back to Colombia. And so I've sort of had, and Heidi, I'm sure will speak to this, and it's been a common thread for many of us in the group, the idea that you can be from many places and you're never entirely from one place when you have an experience like us. So people ask me, well, are you American? And I always kind of hesitate. I'm like, well, I'm from South America. Does that count? And they're a part of, I was that duality. So without further ado, I shall now read. This is Jolly Fats Dies Tonight. At first, the electric violin feels weird, clunky, and alien. It has an ergonomic chin rest and a shoulder pad system, and it's pretty lightweight, but it sits in my hands all wrong. Also, the violin is passive, which means it only works when it's connected to the amplifier. It's a mute instrument, I whine. That's just wrong. But it's perfect for this. Juancho's idea is to lay a few tracks down now and then have me playing live on stage. He says that with the lights and me in a costume, it'll look like it was part of the show, like it was all planned. He doesn't want to tell Samir, he says, because even though he's pretty sure this will work, he still wants to give my cousin full deniability just in case. I make a mental note to tell Samir about this loyal streak. The theme tonight is plancha music, so the older the song, the better. The idea is to spice up the oldies with some chords to make them more dance-friendly, but I'm not feeling it. Besides, Juancho says, smiling, if we'd had your instrument, we wouldn't be able to transfer the music to the computer so easily. I roll my eyes, but smile at the same time. Truth is, he's been super nice, thanking me over and over, being patient as I fumble with the settings and complain about the tone and how I can't move around freely and that there's a slight lag between my movements and the sound. I'm enjoying his company. I'm enjoying myself more than I have in weeks. Maybe my last day on Earth won't be such a waste after all. By the time the guests start arriving, we've laid down some tracks we can work with, and I've worked on some basic chords that I can add to songs. I'm actually quite proud of some of the mixes, and we've managed to work out a system for integrating the beats with my playing so that the transitions are smooth, the tempo rising to a crescendo that will climax triumphantly with the DJ's return. We hope. Juancho says we're ready, but I linger a moment. There's something I can't let go. What you said before, I start, about me not loving this side of my family, that's not true, you know. I just never got to know them. Yet, he says. What? You mean you haven't gotten to know them yet? Yet, I say, the word heavy on my tongue. There's a lot of power in that little word, Jolima. You haven't gotten to know the Fatamis yet. You haven't gotten into Juilliard yet. He smiles. You haven't fallen madly in love with me yet. I smile at that, and his smile gets even wider. The power of yet sounds like the title of a cheesy self-help book, I say. Well, it's nice to have a backup plan in this cheesy help book business in case this evening doesn't work out. But it does work out. It's slow going at first, but the electric violin and I have made a truce by the time I take the stage, and Juancho's confidence gives me the boost I need to get creative with my little touches. I interject sass into Daniela Romo, jazz me up some Maria Conchita, and by the time Emmanuel's Toda la Vida hits, I've invented and mastered the art of the plancha vibrato, pulling double stops, shuffling and chopping my way through a dozen songs. And when the beat drops and the crowd swarms and swells responding to me, I am mighty, powerful, alive.
All right.
And
yay, love it. Yeah, every time I hear that little bit of the story, I'm just reminded all over again why I love that story so much. So thank you for sharing that, Angela. And thank you, Heidi, for bringing Angela to us into the anthology. It was such a fabulous decision. And that is one of the things I love about this anthology, is that it started with a small group of writers who already knew each other, which we'll talk about a little more in the Q&A. And then we each invited somebody else that was new to the group and brought just another wonderful layer to what we had to offer. So now this is weird because I have to introduce myself because I'm reading next. So that's really awkward. But hi, it's me. And so still me. So the story that is part of Unbound actually comes from a larger universe that I've got a couple of books in, and that is my Seven Sins series. And do not ask me, y'all, why I let my publisher talk me into having every single volume in this series have every single word of every single title start with S. It was a terrible idea. So it's the Seven Sins series, and the first book in it is Sword of the Seven Sins, followed by Siege of the Seven Sins, and it just goes on from there, and it's just a terrible turn of events. But that being said, when the group of writers that I'm a part of, and let's see, myself and Lisa and Heidi, of the folks who are here today, were part of that core group of 5 that pulled the anthology together. We knew that whatever story we included, we wanted to be focused on this idea of transformation. And for me, I was already writing these books that were in the realm of the Seven Sins, and I knew I was going to be writing a Seven Sins short story collection. You know how hard that is to say? So I decided that the story that I wrote for Unbound would be set in the Seven Sins universe. And it was a lot of fun to do and a lot of fun to explore. And so this story, unfortunately, also starts with S, and it's called Smooth the Descent. And I'm going to be reading just a little excerpt from that. The months passed, and the clock of myself ticked. Kenneth and I hardly dared to meet, terrified to draw any unnecessary attention to ourselves. The last thing I wanted was to give anyone a reason for their glances to linger on me. But as my belly grew, I could feel time slipping away like sands through an hourglass. One night, as I climbed into bed, Genevieve said, her voice laden with suspicion, "You've put on quite a bit of weight, haven't you, Miriam?" My heart pounded unevenly, but I lifted my chin. "I don't know what you mean," I told her. "Perhaps you should visit the medics and have your eyesight checked." "My eyesight is fine." She slid beneath the blankets of her cot, her gaze fixed on my midsection, as if she could see through my coverlet and the fabric of my shift to what lay beneath. And I knew then that our time had run out. When Kenneth and I met again in the vineyards at dusk the following evening, I told him what Genevieve had said. He ran a hand through his dark hair, his face grim. In the fading light, his broad shoulders blocking out the last bit of the sun as it sank below the line of the arbors and beneath the horizon, he looked like a boy made of light and shadows, as if I had conjured him from the deepest desires of my heart. But when I blinked, he was still there, flesh and blood, pain clear in the depths of his sea glass eyes. "Miriam," he said, "no matter what happens, remember, I love you." Despite all we'd been through, we'd never spoken those words to each other before. Perhaps it was ridiculous, given that I was bearing Kenneth's child, but there were few words more forbidden to utter. It was as if Kenneth had been saving them up for me, like some kind of treasure, a precious gem for me to carry next to my heart. "I love you too," I told him, and watched his face light with joy. He lifted a calloused hand to cup my chin and bent his head, his mouth finding mine. The kiss was bittersweet, flavored with the tears I hadn't known were streaking my cheeks and the unmistakable taste of goodbye. We were standing that way when they found us. Priest Trausen, in his blood-red robes that swept the ground as he walked, and the two Bellators that accompanied him, clad all in black and studded with weapons. I recognized one of them by his bright red hair, Killian Brynjarsson, who I knew had had the cot next to Kenneth when they were both seventh formers before the choosing. The other one was Ephraim Steiner, 5 years into his training and already one of the 30, the Bellatorum's elite corps whose services were reserved for the most egregious of infractions. Next to them was Genevieve, her pug-nosed face set in a vicious mask of vindication. "You see," she said to the priest, pointing at me, specifically at my belly, which there was no longer any point in trying to hide. "I told the truth." The priest's eyes swept over us, contempt clear in every line of his face. Then his voice rang out through the vineyards, righteous and resonant. "Miriam Larson, Kenneth Gundarsson, I find you guilty of the sins of lust and fornication. You will be sentenced to execution in Clockwork Square. As you have sinned, so will you die, together." I felt a tremor run through Kenneth and into me. Still, he squared his shoulders and I straightened my spine. We had agreed to meet this fate with dignity. I had just a single question, the only one that really mattered. What about the child? The priest drew himself up, regarding me with disgust. "You will be confined to the hospital until the child is born, and your fellow sinner held in the dungeons to contemplate the fate that awaits you both. Then your bastard spawn will join the ranks of the natural born, and the two of you will face the Bellator's blades." His lip curled as if the air surrounding myself and Kenneth had gone rancid. "Bellator's removed the boy from my sight. I'll escort the girl to the hospital myself. She's no threat to me." The Bellators strolled forward, their faces expressionless. They crushed fallen grapes as they went, the tart, sweet scent of happier times filling the air. Neither of them drew their weapons. They didn't have to. There was nowhere for us to run. I clung to Kenneth, for what did it matter now? And felt his arms tighten around me. He'd worried they were a cage, but they were a cradle, a place of refuge. They had always felt that way to me. He held me close, the child alive and moving between us, the person we had made together, the physical manifestation of our love and our sins. "I am a medic." His voice was a shattered whisper, "but I have no idea how to heal a broken heart." Those were the last words he said to me before they took him away. So that's that. Thanks, y'all. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun to write that story, gave a little glimpse into the world behind some of my sub-characters in the larger series. So next up reading, there's John. So John, do you want to tell us where you are and then a little bit about what inspired you to write the story and maybe where the story is going?
Okay. Well, I'm only a few miles from Emily, dealing with the same blustery weather, cold and rainy, and that's why the fireplace is going. Overtime was actually started as a prompt at a writing conference that I went to, where we were encouraged by the instructor to pick 3 things that we like in movies or books that we enjoy reading. And for me, it was things that I didn't get to read about when I was a teenager, and that would be gay romance, but also other things that I did enjoy was time travel and humor. So Over Time was kind of scratched out in the 10 to 15 minutes that were allotted to us. And I liked it so much that when Emily approached me about maybe contributing to this anthology, I thought, well, that really hadn't left me. I kept playing with that story. It was running around in my head while I was working on other things. And I decided to blow that up into the short story that it is. And now I'm trying to work that up into a full novel. So this is from chapter 1. It's a dual point of view, first person. Adam and Evan are 2 completely different 18-year-old gay kids. One is in present day New York, and the other one is in 1959 rural Texas in a little town called Eden. And this is chapter 1 of Over Time. Adam. I could stare at the back of Nate Branham's head all day, the way his coffee brown hair fades into bronze peach fuzz on his ranch tan neck, how that neck slopes into broad shoulders, and how those shoulders flow into biceps that strain the cotton plaid of his shirt. I'm obsessing, which is dangerous. As a straight A student in mysteries class, my name could be called at any moment. And to be honest, walking to the front of the classroom to solve an algebraic equation right now would be problematic. I steal a nervous glance down, make that impossible. Usually I pray not to go to hell, but at this moment, I'm trying to make a deal with God. If mystery doesn't call on me, I swear, Lord, I'll stop thinking sinful thoughts about Nate. I don't need to look down to know God's ignoring me. Why I keep making these promises is beyond my ability to comprehend. In my 18 years of existence, God has shown himself to be extremely unreliable. In his defense, I did make the exact same promise yesterday. Nate rolls his shoulders and reaches with a calloused hand to scrub the back of his neck. The motion disturbs the air between us, and his familiar scent wafts under my nose. Images of stolen moments in the back of Nate's daddy's pickup flood my brain. I'm definitely going to hell, but not today. The bell rings. It being Friday and the last period, it's a mad dash for the door. Don't forget, mystery calls over the slamming of books and scraping of chairs. I want your worksheets on my desk Monday. My dad has me checking fences tomorrow, Nate says casually as he straightens to his full 6 feet. I could pick you up at 8. My heart skips a beat. Not because I'm keen on repairing fences under the Texas sun, which by June can be scorching, or the few extra dollars Nate's father will throw my way for helping out, but because of what else these day-long outings usually include. I'll ask my dad, I say, still unable to stand. He usually likes me pumping gas on Saturdays. Dad pays me too, though not as much, which is why he might say yes. Can I let you know later this afternoon? Nate shrugs. If our encounters mean as much to him as they do to me, he never lets on, at least not here. Sure. He turns and heads through the hallway. Hey, Betty, wait up. I watch through the door as Nate Branham drapes his arm around his girlfriend. Did you have a question, Adam? Asked Mr. E, interrupting my misery. What? No, I stammer. I'm fine, Mr. E. Thanks. That did the trick, though. I can stand now.
So I love that story too, so much. I have loved that story since the first time I read it, and I'm excited that there's more of it in my inbox to read. That's gonna be my little treat for myself next week. I think it's amazing that John is developing this into a full novel. So hooray. And I'm jealous of your fireplace also, because John is right. We're having a very blustery day. It's true. Okay, so next up is Heidi. And Heidi, as I said before, is part of what we call the Fellowship of the Five, which is our little group that put this anthology together. So there's 3 of us here today. There's myself, who co-edited. Oh yes, I don't know if you can see, but our names are on the spine, I think. But yeah, so we are, yes, 5 Points Press, that is us. And so yeah, 5 Points Press, which is our little collective, and so called because we are, oh look, it's even more show and tell. There's a little dedication. Yeah, we were able with the hardcover to put some truly beautiful elements visually inside the book. And Sarah and Lisa, who are 2 more people who are a key part of our Fellowship of the Five, they did the design together. And then myself and Madeline, who's not here today, worked on the editorial piece. And then Heidi was key in helping us with the marketing piece and helping us also select what stories we wanted to include and helping to arrange an amazing event that we did in Colombia, which was just fantastic. Well, we didn't get to go to Colombia. That would have been even more fantastic, but virtually, which is great. So Heidi, do you want to talk a little bit about where you are and what inspired the story that you included?
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you to the Muse and the Slover Library for having us here today. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk about our work. and I am in Colombia. Unlike Angela, I'm not. Angie is in the capital, and I am the coffee region. Juan Valdez is real. It's a real guy, and I have met him. And it was like an exciting moment in my life. And so this is where we call the coffee region, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And I really invite you all one day to visit Colombia if you get the opportunity. And my story came from 10 years of being a backpacker with my husband. We basically, for 10 years, we would work, save money, spend it all on backpacking. And we stayed in every hostel, and we met every kind of character imaginable backpacking. And there's this idea of transience, and there are these places that are just places you go to get to another place. And there are always interesting people. Dorothy is a big character in my book because we did meet a Dorothy from Germany one year who everything for her was okay. We'd say, "How was Tikal?" It was okay. And it was quite remarkable to meet somebody who was so okay with everything. And then finally, the last piece of my story is about a disappearance. And I think that's one of my greatest fears, is just this idea that somebody can disappear and never knowing what happens next. So I'm going to read a snippet. And for all of you, or any of you who are here, thank you for listening to our words, because this is such a vulnerable moment for authors. I don't know if you all feel the same. When you have to read your words, you're like, oh. And so I appreciate your grace and letting us share our words. This is in the chapter, The Crawl of Time. And Evie is my young woman who has disappeared. Before Evie, this place was a pause, a cheap bed to get from one place that matters to another place that matters. After Evie, this place mattered. It's funny how we prescribe meaning to places like that. The Mountain Condor Hostel had set up a sunrise hike where backpackers could ride in an authentic Jeep and eat authentic foods grown from the local farms, blah, blah, blah. But then Evie happened. Bam! This place became the Times Square of the backpacker route. New hostels popped up. El Descanso changed its name to Desaparecido and started advertising a mysterious sunrise tour turned murder mystery, which is in pretty bad taste. Instead of being a layover, this place became a destination. The biggest group was the church groups forming search groups. There weren't enough hostels for them, so they camped on the edge of town and combed through the valley floor. They held sunrise and candlelight vigils. Mrs. Yates came many times. She never talked to me, not after that first visit with Mr. Yates and Calvert. On the third search mission, the ecobotany students from a nearby university protested because the church groups forming search groups were damaging millions of years of evolution, trampling flowers and plants endemic to this delicate ecosystem. That's one of the things I really love about deserts. A tiny plant can take thousands of years to grow. As the hottest desert temperatures, a carcass gets mummified, the skin growing tough from the dry air, unless vultures come first. It can take months for a skeleton to get exposed and bleach in the relentless sun. The daintiest flower means everything in the desert, so often overlooked. Most people don't understand the desert's lethal, slow beauty. The ecobotanists made their cause international. Then there were protests about protests. Lots of confusion. Nobody ever found anything. Evie just disappeared. Numbers have dwindled over the past year or so. Facts get messed up. I'm often in jail or have gone into hiding or never existed. Evie's missing. I'm the one who disappeared.
Ooh, so that story, I feel like, I hope y'all read the rest of it. It is deliciously creepy and with a fantastic, unreliable narrator, which I adore. And the other thing that I love about it is that Heidi is just masterful at conveying this like sort of haunting sense of disturbance while using very spare language. And it's so easy when you're trying to convey that haunting sense of disturbance in a story to do it by, I don't want to say overwriting, but writing in a way that's like dripping with insinuation and darkness, but yet the language that, even that description of the flower in the desert, it means so much more. And you find yourself, or at least I do anyway, thinking about, why does the narrator know so much about skeletons and how long they take to be exposed? Is that just an interest of hers? Is that a coincidence? Or dun dun dun? Anyway, so I really do love that story, and we kick the book off after the narrative poem with that story, and I just think it's really fantastic. So I'm so glad that Heidi shared that story with us for the anthology. Yay! So last but hardly least, we have Lisa reading. And so Lisa, do you want to talk about, of course, where you are and then what inspired this book? The story for the book?
All right. Hi. Oh God, that blurry background's weird, but I'll leave it. Hi. I am in New York City, the Bronx, actually. I'm going to get rid of this blurry background because it's weird and bothering me. I live in a part of the Bronx called Riverdale, which you might think is like scary and very city-like, but it's not. I can look out and see the Hudson River, and it's a lot of trees. And we have a very sunny day here in New York today, you Southerners. I mentioned that. It's a little chilly. Anyway, so the book is really, the story really is an excerpt, a YA POV from a larger book that I wrote, an adult book. And that, it's a very complex book, but it features Jewish mythology. I am a Jewish person, and I was kind of fascinated by the idea of a monster called a golem, which is supposed to be a protector. And so this monster actually causes this young man to time travel, but he also tells his own story. So this story is told from the point of view of one of the young charges of this monster, and it takes place in 1492 in Seville, Spain, at the dawn of the Spanish Inquisition. So here we go. I have not read this for a while. I hope it still sounds good. And I'm not starting at the beginning. I'm just kind of jump in here. It was the week of the festival of Vela de Santa Ana, and the city streets were filled with dancing, tapas, and drunken revelers. During those weeks in July, we Jews shuttered ourselves inside our homes, lest the merriment turn to violence, as it frequently did. I was struck with a familiar tug of longing, of wanting to be part of the pulsing life of the city, blending in with the conversos and leaving behind my pariah status as a Jew and a cripple. We Jews were unwelcome guests in Seville, as loathed as the twisted appendage on the end of my leg, a defect on the body of Spain, an infestation the monarchy was soon to flush out. The hot week passed in a slow melting blur. It was too hot for Hannah to practice in the plaza. Instead, we sat together in the shade, plying our basket weaving trade. When we turned 16, we would be put to work in Zeta's factory to earn our keep. Our hermit grandfather, Zeta Yaakov, who we saw twice a year, was plenty rich, but insisted we work off the cost of our upbringing. The tantas had no use for my sketching ability, but my skill in basket weaving was highly prized. I was fast and innovative, my weave tight and masterful. But Hannah was dreadful at it, so the tantas decided that instead of producing baskets, Hannah would be better at selling them. Now, every market Tuesday and Friday, she accompanied them to work the stall, where her natural charms were more of an asset than her clumsy fingers. The tantas would not let me come. I'd only get underfoot and require them to wait on me. Instead, they left me at home under the care of Bubby Balthar, the half-blind old crone who spent 3/4 of her life snoozing in a rocking chair by the hearth, and the other quarter demanding I read Torah to her. Left on my own and given my limitations, I grew immeasurably bored. I'd run studies of Bubby's prune face more than I cared to mention, and had read through every one of Zeta Yaakov's books at least twice. I twisted straw for baskets until my fingers crabbed. To break up the tedium, I took to carving a small bit of wood into a little figurine for Hannah, while Bubby's Balsard's snores thundered from the kitchen. Thus distracted, I was startled by the clang of the iron gate that opened to the street. I had no business admitting visitors, but the doldrum of the day was so unbearable, and my loneliness for Hannah's company so acute. I forgot I was eager for any interruption. It took me an interminable amount of time to collect myself, hobble painfully on my crutch to the gate, and peer through the grill work at the person staring back at me. I blinked in disbelief. Gazing at me was a pair of luminous black eyes. I'd never seen Josiah up this close, but there he was, separated from me by only the intricate scroll work of the cast iron gate. What are you doing here? You never came to Papa's store, so I came to you. For a moment, I was too flabbergasted to respond. How did you find where I live? Josiah laughed. We have eyes all over the city, my Jewish friend. Your people shut yourselves up behind walls. But we listen and hear everything. The city is a volcano about to erupt. If you open the gate, I will tell you all about it, and I will fit your shoe. You can do that? What did you think was in this bag? Josiah laughed, an easy, buoyant sound. A cobbler's son begins his training as soon as he is old enough to hold a knife. If I'm going on too long, stop me. I didn't really time this too well. I craned my neck to check on Bubby. The old crone, who's supposedly my caretaker, may be blind, but she has the hearing of a hawk. You must be quiet, like a mouse. I won't need long. Unlatching the gate, I swung the gate inward. There he stood, smelling of lye soap and that undefinable aroma that made me want to press my face to his chest and die listening to the rhythm of his heart. Josiah scanned the well-appointed courtyard, the vivid bougainvillea blooms clinging to the stucco walls and bursting from the central flower beds, the arched portico that ringed the perimeter, the vegetable garden and orange grove. It was a lovely place, and the height of my ungratefulness that I should think of it as my jail. You have no idea what is going on out there, do you? Josiah asked. Have you not heard of the denunciations, the crackdown on fake Christians and Muslims? The jail within the Castillo de San Jorge is filling up with heretics, and so are the fire pits. I blinked at Josiah. Of course I knew about the Converso families, many of whom joined us in synagogue on high holy days, even though they'd taken their baptism. The familiares are rounding up people caught practicing the old ways. In my neighborhood, the Moriscos are reporting anyone caught with a prayer rug. Moriscos? Josiah frowned and shook his head. You really do live in a cave, Cordova. Converted Muslims. Most of them are blatant liars, ratting on each other to avoid getting arrested themselves. We are living in dark times, friend. I swallowed and licked my lips, relishing the sound of the word on his lips. We aren't friends. Josiah smiled. Of course we aren't. But you and your bad foot put your sister in danger. Because if she has to run, she will not leave you behind. And if, the truth be told, I like her. My throat went dry, my heart kicking up a notch. I didn't need to hear about his lust for my beautiful sister, but I did need the boot.
Excellent. Yes, so I love a good love triangle. It's one of my favorite little tropes, romance reader that I am, and there's a fabulous love triangle, as you heard the beginnings of, just in that story. So I also love little side stories that give you a glimpse into what's happening in the larger universe, particularly when it's characters that just have a hint in the main books that there's something interesting about them, then you get to kind of explore that. So definitely in Oceans of Dust, Lisa gets to explore that. So that is a fabulous story. So that's all of the readings for right now. We're going to transition into the Q&A. Before we have some questions in mind and some things that I know we'd like to share with you. But before we do that, I just wanted to open it up and see if there's any questions that anyone who is watching might have. And if you don't have any questions right now, then you can certainly, while we're talking, just go ahead and type them in the chat and then we'll see them. Okay, and then if you have questions, like anything that you've thought of from what we've said or anything that you want to know more about that you think that your viewers would want to know, just interrupt us. We are an easygoing bunch, so no stress here. Okay, so one thing that I find myself just perennially curious about is how during the pandemic, when we were all so isolated, this became a project that we really worked on together, and how, you know, we were unable, a lot of us, myself included, to be able to really talk to people who lived 2 doors down. But yet through this anthology, we were able to talk to people around the world. So I just wonder, I mean, I have my thoughts about this, but from the perspective of first, the 2 other folks who are responsible for putting the anthology together, who are here, Heidi and Lisa, you know, what did you feel was really the impetus and inspiration for pulling this together, and how did it help you or work for you during the pandemic in terms of kind of a gathering spot?
Should I go first, or you want to go, Heidi?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I think I don't even know when we first started talking about this. I know that you know, we had been friends, like in a chat that we met all in various different ways. And just full disclosure, Heidi and I actually are writing critique partners from like a really long time ago. Like, I think from when I first started to write. So Heidi could blackmail me with my horrible writing when I first started writing. And, you know, we stayed in touch, and we all kind of came together into this little group that just felt like home, you know, like a really safe space. And for me, it became like a refuge during COVID to have this supportive community of fellow authors. And I think one day, I don't know, Emily, I think one day we're just like, wow, we have everything we need to publish a book. We have 2 editors, 2 designers, and Heidi, who's like a really great writer and a cheerleader. And, you know, why don't we do this? And I was kind of like, are we nuts? You know, like, I really thought, they're not serious. This isn't going to happen. But they were serious, and it began to happen. And I was like, wow, we're doing this. And yeah, Heidi, you want to add to that?
Well, I have to say that it's called the 5 Points Press, and I'm in Colombia. Madeline is in England. Lisa and Emily are both in the States, and Sarah's in France.
Right.
And I have to be honest that they did all the heavy work. I do recognize that the work that they put into it is incredible, and I had no idea how much work it was to actually independently publish something, because this is really beautifully done. And the editorial skills of Madeline and Emily are crazy good in terms of pushing you to your best. And the design skills of Lisa and Sarah were phenomenal. For me, as a writer, I've lived in Colombia. It'll be 25 years. I moved away starting January. So I've always had online writing people, because as you can imagine, Pereira, Colombia doesn't have this huge bursting community of American writers or English speaking writing writers. And it was really natural for me to feel connected to people abroad. I have done that since way before COVID because that's been my writing life. However, when we were all working together last year, it was lovely to have a group of people where you could just enjoy the process of writing again. Sometimes it happens to many writers. If anybody else wants to speak to this, you can sometimes lose the joy of writing. And with this group of ladies, I found the joy of writing again and this idea of possibility. And then we wanted to extend that to the other people we knew in the writing community, because it's so lovely to work on something in a way that you feel joyful and push to your best, but without that added tension.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to say, for me, I have a similar experience to Heidi in that, Colombia is, I was a journalist and I wrote in Spanish, so I had people to talk about in Spanish. But when I wrote fiction and I wrote in English, it was very lonely for me because I have a limited amount of friends that will read in English. My husband has never read anything that I've written in English because his English isn't good enough. So there's a limit to how many friends you can ask to read the same story 500 times over again. And so this was actually life-changing for me. It was the first time that I had, feedback from writers and from people telling me, hey, this is pretty good. This is nice. This is, and I wrote for the first time in Jolly Fats, I wrote about Colombia in English, and I wrote about my country and my culture and my experience. And it was eye-opening. It was life-changing. It was, every time I tell them, they're like, no, but really, it was an experience that I will never forget, that changed my life because I had never had that opportunity to share what I had written with people like you, and I wouldn't be here talking to the Muse and talking to the library and talking to all of you if it hadn't been for Heidi and if it hadn't been for Emily and Lisa and everyone since. It was them five at first. John, I don't know if you feel this now, but even though it started with the Fellowship of the Five, I have felt so welcome. You are all so generous, and I've genuinely come to care so deeply about all of you, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I just want to interject and say that it started with the five of us, and then it expanded. And there's, a couple of people. Well, there's a other group of people that really weren't in the anthology that we kind of hang out with. But I just feel that, I don't know, it's like when I was listening to the stories, I had this voice reader thing. So I was doing a lot of walking during the pandemic, Angela, and yours was one of the first stories I listened to. And I was like, God, I love this woman. I need to know her. And then I was driving and listening to John's, and I go, God, I love this guy. I need to know him. Like, I fell in love with both of you from your writing. And I'm telling you, it's a pretty good indicator. Like, I really like you guys. And I'm so grateful for the friendships that came out of this. The process was difficult for us. But I'm really proud of us, what we did, Emily, the back and the forth and the Sarah. I even had a nickname.
About the back and the forth. Let's not.
Oh, the back and the forth and the fourth. I have a nickname for Sarah because, Sarah's a good bit younger than me, just a little. And I'm very energetic, but Sarah makes me look like a cadaver. She's so energetic. And she would send me these ideas like, how's this? And I was like, oh my God, slow down. So I started calling her the design puppy, and I started calling myself the grumpy cat. Because it would be like, no, Sarah, no, we have to work at the type, because that's actually my job. I'm a design professor. So I felt like this is becoming like my job with a very, very, very talented student, and very ambitious. So it was exciting. And I will tell you, it really helped me to feel, in addition to the joy of meeting the participants, and there's other people that were great that I got to meet, but just the joy of meeting John and Angela and adding them to our family. It was just, it really helped the mystery of what it's like to indie publish, because it's something I really want to do. And I was just so scared. And to me, doing this really helped me feel like, oh, this can be done. It's opened another world.
And I think that that's really worth, this isn't a question, but I'm just going to bring it up here, and anybody please weigh in, because I think it is really important to think about. So, there, back in the day, if you've got some aspiring, writers watching this, there really was only one accepted way to publish. You got an agent, and then you were published, by a publishing house, you got an advance, etc. And those agents, etc., really functioned as the gatekeepers, right? And now the world of publishing, that is certainly very much still available to you. And there are many advantages to publishing with a major house, among them getting that advance among them, not having to do quite as much work when it comes to marketing, sales, etc. Among them not having to coordinate your own independent editors and designers, and among them having a reach, and to some degree, like legitimizing to some degree the work that you do if that's something that is important to you. But that being said, you know, even though the world of traditional publishing is wide, there are only so many seats at the table. And so what's happened is that sometimes as the whims of publishing ebb and as they flow, there are certain books that are very popular, or certain themes that go out of style, or certain things that feel overdone. So the market is saturated. And when that's the case, if you've happened to have written, it could be a really good story in one of those areas where the market is saturated, readers may not be sick of reading these things, but you know, the publishers may believe that they are. And so it creates a situation where some very, very talented authors can't get published. And it can be incredibly dispiriting to think, well, I've made this as good as I can. Maybe I've paid an external editor to work on it. I've spent hours on it. My critique partners have read it. I literally don't know how to make this any better. And now I feel like maybe I'm throwing good money after bad because I can't get it picked up what do I do, you know? And so this idea of being able to independently publish, to say, okay, I'm not going to be any less professional. I'm still going to be very serious about how this is edited. I'm still going to be very serious about how this is copy edited and proofread, which are all important steps in the traditional publishing process. You know, you have your book, it gets accepted, you're assigned an editor, the editor works with you on what's called the developmental editing process, the plot, the dialogue, the setting, all those different things. And then when you've got it as polished as you can, it goes to a copy editor and a fact checker, and it goes to a proofreader, all of that before it goes to the designer. So when you indie publish, when you self-publish, it comes to you to do all of those things. But the good news is there are tremendously talented independent freelancers out there who do all of those things. And so if you're willing to do the work, to link yourself up with organizations, and there are organizations out there that already have sifted through all these folks for you to present them, and you're willing to educate yourself about the marketing and figure out how perhaps Facebook or Amazon ads, etc., work, then you can bypass these gatekeepers and you can bring your book into the world. And this is especially successful with genre fiction, such as romance or mystery or thriller, books that can be produced relatively quickly in what readers call, or the publishing world calls, rapid release, right? And books that, you know, the reader's going to want to gobble up the next one, the next one, the next one. So the model in traditional publishing is one book per year. And the problem with one book per year is that you cannot really write to market in that way. If you submit something to a traditional publisher, it's going to be 18 months to 2 years after you sign that contract before your book hits the shelf. So that means that the publishers are taking a guess at what the readers will want to read then. If you're independently publishing, since you have control for the most part over the speed at which you release, you can write a lot closer to what they call write to market, figuring out what's out there. So it is a far more open world than it was before. And I know some people who really want to stick with traditional publishing because they don't want to mess with learning all of that other stuff, and or they really want the security of it, and or that's been their dream, and or if you go with traditional publishing, you're far more likely to be able to see your book physically on the shelf, and that's really important to a lot of people too. But then I know a lot of indie authors, independent authors, who they just want to reach as many readers as possible. Their model is that they can write relatively quickly because they write in a genre which has a pattern, and they're able to perhaps make more money from their writing if they do rapid release and successfully market in that way, because they're not in a situation where anyone is taking royalties, be that agents taking their cut and then the publishers taking the royalties. So that's just a little crash course on traditional versus indie publishing, which is not a question or an answer, I suppose. But I just feel like if you're someone who's just starting out in this world and maybe you're wondering, like, what does this world of publishing really look like? And what do people mean when they say traditional publishing? And what do people mean when they say indie publishing? And is it accessible and is it not? It used to be really considered kind of, if you did stuff with self-publishing, it used to be something that people really looked down upon. And now that really has changed. So I want to give John a chance to talk. Before that, Sarah just posed a question. And I feel like Heidi or Lisa, please answer this because I feel like I talked too much already. The question is, speaking of marketing, can you talk about why you all decided to offer the digital copy of the book without cost on different platforms?
Want me to take it?
Sure.
Okay, so part of the concept behind this, what really, before we got to, we all have the skills to do this, it was really about wanting to share our stories, a feeling that, we're going through all of this here, the pandemic, we're isolated. There must be folks out there, young people out there who really would like to read stories that would comfort them and make them feel connected. So we really didn't go about this as a profit-making endeavor. We wanted to reach people. We really wanted to sort of give a little, send a love note to the world, I guess, and, heal the world, but also heal ourselves at the same time, like feel like we were connecting with the world. So it was kind of therapeutic for us. And I think the whole point was that it was going to be complicated to try to do it for money. We just didn't want that feeling like we got to sell this book. We just wanted to feel like, let's share this book as much as possible. Let's get these stories out there in the world. And, if people want the hardcover, they could purchase it. We're not making a profit at it, but it is expensive to, the cost of it to have it made in hardcover. There's a cost. So it just really covers the cost. So yeah, I guess, does that answer the question? Is there anything I left out of that? Anybody want to add to it?
No, I think that's really it, is that, we wanted to, it was about accessibility. It really was, we wanted to remove as many barriers to accessibility as possible during a time where teens in particular, who might be dealing with difficult situations in their lives, who in the past have been able to use school or extracurriculars or other places as a way to escape their homes that might be a difficult place to be, now could not because of the pandemic, especially if they were dealing with any kind of abusive situations or anything like that. And so we all knew from growing up, any reader will know that books can be a wonderful escape. And we wanted to be able to offer that escape to teen readers. And we didn't want to have any barrier in the way. So that really is why.
And it was an escape for us too, I think, got us out of our, we were all feeling pretty trapped at that time, I believe. It was at the peak of it.
Yes, it was.
Came up with this idea.
It was a dark time. John, so I find it so interesting. The other thing that I really love about this anthology is that, we've got authors at so many different ages and stages of their career. So, Angela talked a little bit earlier about being a recovering journalist and where she is in her career and how this has started for her. And, Lisa and Heidi and I are what I would consider to be mid-career writers.
Dinosaurs?
Okay, speak for yourself, Tyrannosaurus.
Oh yes, I'm the head dinosaur here.
Yeah, but I feel like, we've had a couple books out and we have sort of been like doing this rodeo for a little while. And so I think it's refreshing and different to hear the perspective of folks like, Angela and John, who are just starting out. So especially for teens who might be thinking about like, can I only have one career in my life? That's not so much done anymore. Teens now can switch between careers. It's not like it used to be like back in the day with the 40 years and the gold watch at retirement. So John, I would love to hear, because I think of you as someone who's really good at networking and forging connections. I think that's really a strength that you have. And you're also very good at staying in touch with people and building connections that feel very genuine. I think about the way that we met, for instance. So I wondered if you might share, the career that you started out in. John is an Emmy award-winning journalist. I say this because I know he'd never say it about himself, but it's true. And so I wonder if you could maybe talk about, how you began in that career, what made you decide to change, maybe, and then things that you maybe brought, from one career to the other, and how you have built, your writing community from scratch, because I think that sometimes people think, particularly teens, well, I've got to go get my BFA or MFA in creative writing to build my community. But that isn't how it was for you. And you, in fact, moved from the state where you were living. You did a lot of building and networking. So I would just love to hear from you how that all happened.
Well, like Angela, I'm a recovering journalist, but thank you for mentioning the awards, because I did like winning them. They look very nice up there on the shelf. If I was room rater, I would have them in the background and they would say something about them, but I don't. Yeah, networking is just part of becoming a reporter, I think, because you have to develop sources and make these connections, and you have to work your sources all the time. But there are certain people that you just click with, and it's just easy. It's just natural to stay in touch with certain people. And I met Emily at a North Carolina writers conference because I actually had subscribed for a critique, and she was nice enough to say it was one of her favorite things to read. And so we ended up working together on my first novel, which I'm querying now. That's Dead Enough. So that was just a natural connection that I had going with Emily. But I happened to be in Starbucks here by the house and overheard one woman talking to another woman about this writers group. And I just kind of injected myself into the conversation because I was looking for something. I needed something like that because I'm trying to improve my writing. I don't have an MFA. I don't want to go back to school. I have no desire to go back to school and get a degree. But since I had already, been a reporter for decades, I knew a little bit of something about writing, but I hadn't really written fiction. I started working on the novel when I was still working full-time as a reporter, coming home at 11 midnight, working till 2 or 3 in the morning writing. It was good. I had friends reading it and they were saying good things, but those are friends, and friends and relatives, they're going to say nice things. I needed to have a group of writers who were further along in their journey, whose opinions I could and lessons I could take back with me. So I've been learning from people much younger than me, who are truly my mentors, like Emily and John Bemis and people like that who've been just great. And then going to conferences and attending webinars and when possible, in-person conferences. SCBWI has been a great help and resource, and just making connections and friends there, sharing our writing with each other through that network, and forming little subgroups with Emily and Lisa and others through Facebook or just text chains. But I'm still thrilled that I'm included in this group of people, because I'm probably one of the earliest, least experienced writers. And I still think about Heidi's story and how haunting it was. And I still think about how uplifted I felt at the end of Angela's story. And I'm just flabbergasted sometimes. I stop and think I'm part of this group. And it's just an honor to be part of this group.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. And I think that, John's message, for teens starting out, I think it's really valuable, because I think that there's this idea with teen writers, oh, well, you have to get this degree, or, oh, well, you have to go to this school. But I would argue that teen voices are amongst the freshest voices that are out there, untainted by what you think you should sound like, or how you think you should write, or all of these different things. Especially, I think, teens writing for teens, there isn't that automatic barrier that there is once you're no longer a teen, So I just feel like it is, if you're a teen and you're watching this, don't let anybody tell you that you have to wait to start writing, or that, it's too early to start writing. Your voice is absolutely every bit as valid as all of the more experienced voices out there. Angela, do you want to say something?
But also, if you're not a teenager, if you're not 20 or 30, if you're maybe 40 and up, you're welcome too. Your voice matters too. And it's not too late for you either. So it's really never too early and never too late. There are no rules, but there are principles. Learn the principles and For me, at least, I have found artists in general and writers specifically to be among the most generous people. Write to us, tell Susan and Sarah, reach out. There are so many resources available, so many people willing to share what they know. There's so much out there. Dip your toe in whenever you're ready. We're here for you.
Well, on that beautiful note, I agree completely. Is there anything else that anybody else on the panel wants to add, or something that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
I just want to piggyback on what Angela just said about generosity and writers sharing. I mean, I guess because I come from an art background and we're used to the whole critique environment of looking at each other's work and learning, not just from what people tell you, but from looking at someone else's work and realizing how much you know. So this is a message. I'm not, I've never taught writing. I'm not an editor. And I'm sort of, I never went to writing school. I'm an artist by training. But what I want to say is that if you have a group of friends who enjoy writing, and if you're a reader, you could help each other enormously. Like, you would be surprised how much you know. I share work with some of the people here, and they're like, well, I don't have anything to help you with. You're a published writer. I'm like, are you kidding me? You know so much. Angela and John and some other ladies out there, they have, like, I help them because it's fun. But trust me, I get so much back from you guys. And I think it's so rewarding and it's so much fun to do that. It's just everything, it's like, yeah, it's nice to be published. But to me, if I had to just be published and not have a community like this, I'll take the community. Thank you very much.
It is really true. And I think that, one of the key elements of being like a really good writer is being a really attentive reader, honestly. And if there was, like, if somebody asked me for, and actually maybe let's do this before we go. Let's all go around and just give one piece of writing advice. Doesn't have to be pithy, doesn't have to be witty, doesn't have to be the most brilliant thing you ever thought of. But just something, doesn't have to be your top writing tip ever, but just something that you've learned in the world of writing that you would share with someone at any point along their journey, whether starting out or further. And the one thing that I'll say, I think applies to life as much as writing, but really it applies to writing. And I'd say pay attention. Pay attention to what you read and how you take that information in, how what you read affects you emotionally, what moves you and what bores you. Pay attention to conversations. If you're out in public and you hear people talking, pay attention to the dynamics between people and see if you can spin a little story off of that. Pay attention to the way, like, the asphalt feels under your feet after it rains, and pay attention to the way your hands feel when you plunge them into a snowbank, when it's cold. All these things, this paying attention is the basis for your creativity. So everywhere you go, even if you think that you're going to the most mundane place possible, the grocery store, the vet, whatever, and of course, especially if you have the opportunity or privilege to go someplace special, or even if you can't go anywhere and you are just stuck in your house, there's things to observe there too. If you watch a movie, if you watch a film, pay attention to that. If you have the privilege to see artwork virtually or otherwise, take that as your inspiration, because the more you truly and really pay attention to the world around you, the richer your writing life will be. That is my one piece of advice. John, do you have a piece of writing advice?
I can't improve on what you just said. I agree with it totally. I think just observing, picking up on what people are saying, how they interact with each other, sensations that we feel. Everything is a source of material for to improve your descriptions in your writing, and then just reading good writers, just reading books, and allowing yourself to enjoy the story, which I just used to read for pleasure, but now when I'm reading, I'm picking up on, that's a clue, that's a hint, that's something that's foreshadowing, and I'm starting to pick apart these stories from a different perspective now as a writer than I ever did when I was just reading for pleasure. is a whole different experience, and it doesn't diminish the joy of reading. If anything, I appreciate more really good writing because I see and appreciate what they're doing.
Absolutely. I completely agree. It's very different to read as a reader than it is to read as a writer. So I completely agree. Angela, I know you have to probably go soon. Do you want to go next?
I would say embrace the manure in this sense that your first draft is going to be mierda. Your first rejection is going to feel like manure. There are days in which you're going to feel and it's going to look and there's going to be a lot of wading with a D through that. Embrace it because manure is really good fertilizer. And you're going to see, and it's okay. It's okay if it's not, the first time, it's okay. Embrace it. People have this idea that if you're doing what you love, it's gonna be great right away. And it's not going to take work. It does take work. It is work. It's just work you love, but it is work. It's not going to be, oh, well, if it wasn't perfect the first time out, then it must mean that I'm not meant to do this. This maybe isn't my real calling, and people stop trying because they don't meet success early on. So I would wholeheartedly say, this is maybe not a bumper sticker worthy phrase. Embrace the manure.
Oh my God, I know I can always rely on Angela to make me laugh, but also deliver hard truths in a way that makes
And also make me hungry.
No,
Not
that's
this time, not with the manure. Usually she's talking about food. Not today, not today.
I know you don't like to cook and stuff, but now
I do have to go though. But thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Susan.
Bye.
And I love the
Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
Angela.
you.
Bye, Angela. Okay, so I don't know if I should let you talk now that, Lisa, now that you said that eating manure makes me think of food, but that's okay. In fact, Heidi, why don't you just go next and share with us your pieces?
I see Lisa battling with her family.
I see it too.
So actually, I have the top tip. Even though Emily said we didn't have to share the top tip, but I'm going to tell you, it's the inspiration you get. The best inspiration you get is called big inspiration, but in chair. And you just got to show up. Just show up and put it on the page. And this is with any job. This is with any career. And that's my best inspiration. Every time I sit on the chair and I get something on the page, I usually delete most of it eventually, but sometimes there's a gem. And that's what you need to do.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that it can be really hard to sit down and write. A friend of mine is an 83-year-old former journalist. She's written many, many books. And I said to him, well, how did you do all of this while raising 2 kids and this, that, and the other? And he's got all these accolades and these films and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, I just treated it like any other job. Like, got the kids off to school, made their breakfast, came home, button chair. And he worked until and some days are better than others. And I think it's a fine line between this is a creative pursuit and I can't force creativity on days that I'm not feeling creative. But guess what? If you don't write something, then you're going to feel even worse the next day, because for me anyway, the further I get, people say you can't edit a blank page. I don't totally believe that, because I think that I do a lot of editing and writing in my head before stuff ever gets onto the page. But I will say that the further I get away from actually writing, the harder it is to get started. The story starts to feel more ephemeral and not like a real thing. And so I totally agree that, like, if you've got something you want to write, it's okay if it's not perfect. Like Angela says, it's okay. It's never going to be that perfect, beautiful soap bubble of a story or a scene that's in your head. You're going to write it down. It's going to start to feel a little bit different, but it's going to be something beautiful all on its own. Even if, like Heidi says, you get one word out of it, or even if it's sort of like the portal through to the rest of the story. So I second that. Okay, Lisa, what do you think?
Oh, I got too many. I don't know where to start. Can I do 2?
Sure.
I mean, I think the first thing is just give yourself permission to be a writer. I mean, I came to this very late. I've been around on this planet a long time, and I lived a whole life as an artist and a designer, and I was very comfortable with all that. And I was like, well, I'm an artist and I'm this and this and that. And then I don't know, somewhere along the line, I decided, let me try this writing thing. Shh, don't tell me. I wouldn't tell anybody, like I just felt so embarrassed. And, I actually teach a course, a design course that makes students want to write stuff. And my point is that we are all storytellers. We all have stories in us. And no matter how old you are, who you are, where you live, your stories matter. And of course, you want to learn the craft to get those stories out so somebody could really experience it the way you like an immersive experience for them. So there is that inspiration or that belief that you have the right to tell that story. And then you have to have the patience and the fortitude to develop that craft and just keep going with it. And I guess that's the same thing. I don't know. I guess that's it.
I agree with you completely. That, you do have to have patience. And
right.
You do have to be willing to stick with it. But, I think like all of us who are here today came to writing at different phases and different stages of our life. And I was on a podcast earlier today, and we were actually talking about how myself and one of the hosts both had experienced writing marketing before we turned to creative writing. And you would think that that sort of writing marketing copy is unrelated to creative writing, but it's really not, because it gave me the ability to write query letters. It gave me the ability to imagine how other people might perceive what I wrote and have to be persuasive when I sat down to do those query letters. Like when I met John for the first time at the North Carolina Writers Network conference, I said, to my partner as I was sitting at home reading through the stories, and I read John's. I don't know if I ever told you this, John, but I read John's, and I was like, this person says that he's never written before. This is his first novel. This can't be right. This is a professional writer. I am confused. And then, when I met John, that's one of the first things I said, do you mind? I don't remember this, John. We were sitting at that little table in that big old room. I said, would you mind, before I tell you what I think, would you mind telling me your professional background? And that's when he shared, and I was like, oh, it all makes sense. So even though John was not a novelist, his professional journalism background, which was for television, I think primarily, right? Television, shone through. So all the writing work that you do, whether you're doing corporate writing, copy, grant writing, which I did, and I know Heidi does, like it all, whether you're writing for TV, it all feeds into your career. So don't worry or feel like you've sold out or if you've lost time, it all comes together.
There's a flip side of that I'd like to point out, and that is humility, because I think there's lots of different classes of people. And sometimes there's people like, say, John and Angela, like, oh, I've done this kind of writing, but I don't know if I could do that kind of writing. Oh my goodness. I almost feel like that's a better place to be. You come into it with humility. I mean, I did. I was like, oh my God, I've written my whole life, but I don't know what I'm doing. I have read, no offense, I've read the works of English teachers and English professors, and they're like, I'm an English teacher. I know how to write everything, and it's like, no, you don't. So, I think humility and realizing that writing fiction, it's a different animal. It's a different art form. I was like an A student. I always got A on all my papers. But when I started writing, I was like, God almighty, I don't know anything at all. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that is important, to be willing and able to look at the structure of fiction and see, but when you practice writing in whatever way, like for example, Lisa, she's a visual artist, as she shared. If you read her writing, you could probably, and that she's a visual artist, you can see that on the page. Like one of her gifts is really for description. And she writes these incredible, beautiful descriptions. Sometimes she goes a little crazy with the metaphors and the similes, and we joke around about that. I'm like, okay, we got two similes in one sentence. We can't do that.
Well, you have to come in with a whacker. I do,
but if you're a musician, we're probably going to hear your music in your writing. If you are a visual artist or a painter, we're probably going to see your imagery in your writing. So, I think that's something worth thinking about. But okay,
it sounds to me like both Emily and Lisa, what you're both talking about, even though it's maybe the opposite sides of the same coin, but that willingness to learn, right? To learn a new craft, fiction's a new craft, but also to learn from your past experiences and bring all of that to bear as you're learning this new thing. So just kind of being really open to bringing all of that into your art.
To be brave and to know that you have the right to tell your story, but you have to have the patience and the willingness to learn the craft to do it. I don't know if I could think of a good analogy for it, but
here's a little analogy, here's a little analogy that I use with the teens. You're practicing your writing kung fu, right? Or your art kung fu, because that's what it is. Creativity of any kind and learning things requires patience and practice. And so, just having those 2 points and building your creativity into many different things is really what it's all about.
I think so. I mean, I think that one of the things about writing that, really resonates with, what you just said, Sarah, is, my son does martial arts, and when they're learning forms, there's a lot of repetition, like you just said. There are some kids who cannot stand the repetition, and they've literally left the dojang because they're like, oh my God, I'm so bored. But the kids who stick with it and are willing to do that repetition, at first the forms are there, but they don't look quite right, and the individual parts are jerky. And then by the time they master the forms, it looks almost like a dance, And so I think that the hard thing about writing, I have found, among other hard things about writing, is if you play in a band, you get to play with other people. Right away, you're jamming with other people and you're hearing your sound reflect off of their sound, and whether or not you're making beautiful music, and then you feed off the energy in the crowd, and there's a sort of immediate feedback. When you write, a lot of the time, not always, but unless if you're writing collaboratively, but in general, you're writing by yourself, and it might take you a while to even feel brave enough to share your writing with somebody else. And then if you do choose to share your writing with somebody else, I would say make sure that somebody else reads the kind of thing that you like to write. For example, Heidi does not like romance whatsoever. So if I wrote romance, I would never share that with her because she would be like, this is boring and cheesy, So I do think, though, that sort of repetition, being willing to repeat, not expecting to get it right the first time, knowing that you might write a practice book, and being willing to be vulnerable and put yourself on the page and be open, like we said, and knowing that there are people who, whose feedback you need to listen to. I think it was, I know we need to go because we're almost done, but I think that this is it's a paraphrasing of a Neil Gaiman quote. And it's something very much just like, I'm going to say it wrong. I don't remember exactly how he phrased it, but the idea is readers are always right if they point out that something is amiss in your work, and they're almost always wrong when they tell you how to fix it.
Wow, that is really good.
That's really great.
Right. So I know we have to go, but I think this relates to like what we were going to say just to finish this out, if that's okay.
Stephen King, right?
Excuse me?
Stephen King book on writing.
Oh, that is a great book.
One of my favorites. And I think Angela kind of said it in her own Angela way, but he has it in his book. And to paraphrase Angela, Stephen King says, all first drafts are manure. Or he says it differently, but it's true. They are garbage. They're terrible at their nature. If anybody thinks they're going to write a first draft and that's it and it's publishable, no.
Although I will say, and then I know we have to go because we really do, but I will say this, there's no one way to write. And so Lisa's saying that really made me think of this. Madeline, who's the co-editor on the anthology, she dictates a lot of her stuff that she writes for various reasons, some of them physical and some of them preference. She dictates a lot of stuff that she writes. She writes a very messy first draft that's just word vomit. basically, not to be gross. And then she comes through at the end and she cleans it up, right? And that enables her to write in first drafts incredibly quickly. I am the opposite. I cannot dictate. It does not work. And I write very carefully. I go back and I revise as I write. And then when I come back the next morning, before I can sit down and write the next thing, I have to go back and read what I wrote the day before. Otherwise, I'll recapitulate what I wrote. John's nodding. So the last thing I want to say is, in the writing world, no matter where you are on the journey, the beginning, the middle, or the wherever else, there is this disease that we call comparisonitis. And it's really easy to compare yourself to the person next to you, in front of you, or behind you, and be like, they've done this.
That's backwards?
Yeah.
Oh, it's good. Look.
I can see it. Comparison is a thief of joy. So, I just
want to say, on my desk.
Yes, I would say to aspiring writers, just to close us out, that don't worry when you hear somebody else's story if they've accomplished something faster or differently, if they write in a different way that you do, and then they experience success, so then you try to do it and it doesn't work for you. Everybody writes differently, and it's not correlated with how successful that you're going to be. So, when you find your own path and what works for you, stick with that, and don't compare yourself to the person next to you, for sure.
And find people whose criticism you trust, people who want you to make your story great, who love your story, but you could take criticism from, because not all criticism is trustworthy. Some of it is whatever, just not right. But if you could find people you trust and they have critiques for you, and you take it all, listen to it. Because
Absolutely.
that's how you become a better writer.
Right, find your community.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think
Yep.
finding community is so important. We have just about hit our time. Everybody, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you
today,
for having us.
Thank
sharing
you.
Your
Appreciate
words
it.
and your
Thank you so
wisdom and your
much.
time. Thank you to Sarah and Slover for co-hosting. Thanks to Jen Vance, who's not here, from Books Forward, for reaching out about this event. And again, thank you all so much for being here with us.
Thanks. I wish I
Thank
could
you.
I
come to
wanted
your
to
writer's
say
place.
one
So
little
awesome.
thing. Just, build your community. Your libraries are here for you. We have a community right here with the Muse Writers Center, the Books Forward. We offer programs that connect you to other writers. So check out
I'm here
our
if you need
program.
me. I love doing that. I love
you.
connecting with teenagers about
Thank you,
writing.
Sarah.
I don't
Thank you,
get to
Susan.
do that very much, but I love
Thank
it.
you.
Bye.
Wonderful.
Bye, y'all. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.